Next, I want to bring up Chris Mitchell, who is an anti-litter specialist for the city of Pittsburgh, Department of Public Works, and co-chair of the Clean Pittsburgh Commission. His work encompasses the city's operations, engagement with public volunteer coordination, and education, environmental justice, and equity of service. All of that. All of that. That was a lot. And joining him is Melissa Muroff, who is the chief of the Environmental Crimes Unit and program coordinator for the Chester Partnership for Safe Neighborhoods, housed in the Delaware County District Attorney's Office. She manages a grant funding funding and community outreach initiatives to reduce gun violence and to deter illegal dumping in Chester. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christopher Mitchell. I'm very tall. There we go. In an anti-litter specialist for the city of Pittsburgh, in talking about our systems change approach to litter, which is a little hard to say, I wanted to highlight two of our biggest methods of work for systems change, discovering two of our largest problems, which leads us to two of our largest solutions. First, I'm just going to introduce how I got involved as anti-litter specialist, and then how we turned to systems change as our main driver for anti-litter efforts. In 2019, the Department of Public Works sought to hire an anti-litter specialist. I was working for DPW already as a clerk and went for the role and got it. And I show up on Monday, my first day as a specialist of something I really know very little about. And I ask, what am I doing here? What's my job, my day-to-day? And our Public Works Assistant Director looked me in the eye and said, "We need you to change the hearts and minds of Pittsburgh," which was a tall order for somebody doing payroll the Friday before. But I thought about it for a while, and that said to me, behavioral modification psychology. How do we get people to act the way we want them to act? So, at first, we did a lot of research on messaging, effective messaging, including attending the 2019 Litter Summit in Harrisburg. Here you see many members of the Clean Pittsburgh Commission, some faces that are in the audience today. Our biggest takeaway from this research period was basically this: telling to people to change their behavior doesn't work. Instead, environment shapes behavior, so we have to focus on shaping the environment around people first. Pittsburgh's had several anti-litter campaigns before. Beautify our burg, don't trash our turf, pick up for Pete's sake. All these things sort of die on the vine or languish between administrations or personnel, and we can't really be sure about how effective any of them were. So we decided we have to focus on the environment around people instead of going out there and just telling them not to do something. This led us to reframe the issue in front of us rather than view our daily operations as people are out there littering and dumping and we just have to deal with it. Now we think of it as our current operations, as they are barriers to people preventing litter and illegal dumping. This lets us take responsibility for the problem and makes the people we need to fix or change us first. And much of this work takes the form of process improvement, data analysis, and gathering. So my favorite example of this type of work was our volunteer applications. In 2019, we were still asking people to fill out a printed PDF and just to clean up their neighborhood. And it would take about 4 to 6 weeks to approve that application. Why it took 4 to 6 weeks, it was because, according to our union contract, picking up litter was our laborer's job. And so we had to ask the union's approval for somebody to go out there and pick up a Snickers wrapper, which was nuts, right? So we said, we have to fix this first. So that's where we kind of find our problems there. Our application was the barrier. So we worked with the union so that they agreed to all applications going forward. They'd approve. We created an easy online application. We gave all volunteers supplies and services in exchange for filling out the application. And then we created an online calendar of events, put it into a tracking system. So what once took 4 to 6 weeks now took about 20 minutes per approval. And we were really proud of that. How crazy that was. We were asking anybody to do it. And then after about a year or two, we said, we get 300 to 400 of these applications a year. I don't have 20 minutes for each of these. We have to do this again. So we realized we're really just robotically moving information from one place to another, from an online survey to an email to a calendar to our tracking system, over and over. It's like, why not have a robot do it? With Microsoft Automated Flow, we put this whole thing in there, and it does all the work we did over 4 to 6 weeks in about 45 seconds. Somebody fills out our application, takes them about 30 seconds. We look at it in our email, say yes or no, all that stuff happens. So we're really proud of that kind of work. That's how we want to build capacity to do more and do better things. The other aspect of our volunteer applications is that we had tons of data just sitting on paper in files somewhere. So we just took all that stuff, put it into a tracking system, not knowing what we'd find, right? That's what I love to do, is I like to gather and gather and gather, and then find out what it tells me rather than go in with like prescribed ideas. So we see years worth of baseline data of how people were volunteering in the city, and then in 2019, when we introduced our new applications, we see immediate changes in how people acted based on how we changed ourselves. So those are the two main drivers. We're talking about process improvement and data analysis. We took that same analytical eye to several projects, several different aspects of our work, from worker safety to our phone systems to our website and things like that, where we really learned one of our biggest problems was when we took that same method to our 311 service requests. Nominally, the way it's supposed to work is this: you have a pothole in front of your house, you call 311, you say, come fix it, we'll do it eventually. But when we started looking at trash, we saw something different, is that it had the highest reroute rates out of anything else in our system. So 66% of the time somebody called the city to complain about a dumpster, it went to the wrong place and would have to be rerouted. And we'd waste months of time passing these requests back and forth. So why was that? Why is the reroute rates for dumpsters so high? It turned out we had 4 different categories in our 311 system going to 3 different departments, all supposed to be used for different reasons, just minor differences in who's doing this, but they're all used the same way. This is overflowing, please somebody do something about it. So that's the big question there, is like, why are so many departments in our city involved in dumpsters? In fact, why are so many departments involved in trash in general? So I don't know if you can already tell this about me, but I feel like I don't know anything unless I put it into a graph. So that's what we did. We started with who's responsible for enforcing what in the city. We start very simply with, is there trash on the ground? Then you go to, is it litter? Is it illegal dumping? Is it in the public property, private property, right-of-way? Is it from a dumpster? Is it from a litter can? Is it from curbside set-out? We ask and we ask until we get to the correct department. And so we realized we were asking our residents to have an encyclopedic knowledge of who's doing what, but also our own staff, which we don't know. We're in totally different buildings. We don't know what those other guys are doing over there. So of course we're getting it wrong so often and wasting months of time trying to figure out who's the right person, and then who knows if it's actually getting done once it reaches the right people. So you might look at this and think, well, isn't it great you've got so many people in so many departments dedicated to this issue? And counterintuitively, the more we split this up, the less is able to be done, right? All those people in all those different departments had other higher priority, and litter often just got tacked on to the end. So who knows really how much they'd be able to dedicate to that, because they have much more bigger things to do according to themselves. So, this is our big problem with how we operate as a city, who's doing what. We took on another seemingly unrelated project of data analysis that turned out to have a big connection to this. In 2020, we piloted a litter index, which is a street segment by street segment surveying of how littered it was using the Keep America Beautiful metric of 1 through 4. This litter index allowed us to learn a lot about ourselves. It gave us a baseline of where we are on litter. It told us how littered we were, so we saw about 1/4 was a clean streets in our pilot area, which was about 2/5 of the city, the north and west sides of the city. So, only about 1/4, a little under that, was clean. Then 3/4 of the city had at least a moderate amount of litter. And then a full 1/3 of that 3/4 was heavily littered, and then another 1% was either heavily littered or found to have illegal dumping. So we're really excited to learn all this data, where it is, and how, and give ourselves a number to start from, right? We can say this is how littered we are, and we can measure our improvements on it. But our biggest problem was when we took that data and compared it to our 311 data, we found a really disturbing trend. It's that the places with the highest amount of litter put in the least amount of requests about it. Places with the least amount of litter had a lot of requests, and we can infer a lot of different. Oops, wrong slide. We can infer a lot of different reasons for this, whether it's places in heavily littered don't know about 311. People in really clean areas are busybodies and they know about 311 and they bother us about little things. But without knowing the exact whys of why people are acting this way, there's a real problem in determining who we service. When we use 311 service requests to prioritize our work, we are most likely servicing the people who may need it the least and ignoring the people who may need it the most. So that's bad. I don't know if you can tell. So those are the two biggest problems on how we operate on litter and illegal dumping as a city. The inequality of service that people get when we respond to 311 requests almost solely, and two, our fractured responsibilities. Everyone's sort of doing it, which also means that nobody's sort of doing it, right? So this understanding of our two biggest problems led us to our two biggest solutions. Our urban blight index and our gold plans. So in 2023, using the process that we created for our litter index pilot, we're going to expand citywide to an urban blight index. This is going to monitor and track and put into those really great GIS maps of so many things that the city wants to take full ownership of, take full stock of, and not rely on crowdsourced data. We will know where things are if nobody tells us about it. That's how we're going to make sure that we are equitably servicing our residents, is getting away from that reactive, with our index pilot, that was undertaken it was about 6 months to do that 2/5 of the city. It was done by a single surveyor, which was me. I was out there by myself, just giving everything that 1 through 4 rating. But we expect in 2023, with a full slate of inspectors, we're going to get the entire city mapped out on those problems in 1 month's time. And we're also going to activate work simultaneously. When we see that problem, not only are we going to log it in our tracking system, we're also going to put it into work that needs to be done immediately. So I can't really overstate how much of a game changer this very, very simple technology can be. It's a very simple process, very simple technology, but now we can move away from being reactive to the busybodies, right? Like, we can move away from that and be proactive to actual need. Where am I now? Our second big fix is, it doesn't matter if we know where the work is if we don't fix who does the work. So our second part of the fix is our GOLD plan, standing for Goals on Littering and Dumping, because we love our acronyms in government. GOLD calls for a consolidation of all of those fractured responsibilities into a single dedicated unit. So instead of all those people all the way across the city, who knows who they all are, we're going to distill that down to much more fewer people who can make it their top priority. This concentration solves several problems at once. If we look at these reroute rates again, with this consolidation, we're no longer asking residents to know this minuscule differences between these various trash complaints, because it's now just a situation of there's no wrong answer. You complain about trash to us, it's going to one place. We're not going to pass it back and forth anymore. Our reroute rates are going to go to 0 immediately. This huge mess here is going to become a single question. Is there trash on the ground? Great, we got an answer for you.
I love that slide.
This litter, illegal dumping, and urban blight division, we're kind of right now just calling our citywide division, will house all relevant enforcement personnel, abatement and cleanup personnel, and education and outreach personnel under a single roof, so they can work very closely on these problems to solve that fractured responsibility quagmire. And when we envisioned this unit, we didn't just pull all of this from thin air. We did rely heavily on that Burns McDonnell Keep America Beautiful study of the cost of litter and illegal dumping. You may remember this study told us that of the $68 million a year Pennsylvanians spend on this issue, about 80% of that goes to just cleaning it up afterwards, sometimes long, long after it creates harm for our residents. The study concluded that we have to greatly expand how much we're spending on education, enforcement, prevention in order to lessen those costs in the long run. Having this study helped make that case for change internally. Like, people think I go out there and I tell the people, the residents, to not litter. And it's like, no, I spend all my time telling us internally this matters. This is how I focus my time, is telling the city we have to do better on this. It also allowed us to compare how we operate to the cities. When we talked about all those enforcement personnel and all those different departments, we looked at all of them and realized only one had trash enforcement as their full-time job. This person had done this for over a decade. So if I had walked into my office, my boss's office, and I said, I know we've had one person do this for the past decade, but I want 8 next year, I would have likely been laughed out of the office. But having this comparative analysis per capita of how many enforcement officers each of us had really helped to make that case that we need to do a lot better. And lastly, I do want to come back to education and outreach. We're not abandoning talking to the public about this completely just for internal processes, right? I mean, that's my jam, but we are still going to talk to the public. When Mayor Gainey came into office this year, one of his goals was a new anti-litter campaign. And our answer to that was, let's not do what we've always done, which is we go out there and lecture and chide the public and call them awful little gremlins throwing trash everywhere. Let's actually just be on the same side of the public and tell them what they want to hear. People respond really positively when we tell them, here's the resources available to you, and most importantly, here's what we're doing for you. You know, we don't want to put this off on the public. We want to say, they come to us and they want to say, what are you doing? Here's what we're doing for you. That's going to be our campaign. We're going to actually do the work, fix ourselves first, and then tell people about it. When we fix ourselves first, when we tell people about it, that's how we're going to build trust and forge that path forward with our residents. So I ran through that as quick as I can because I know so many people have places to be, but I'm very proud of Pittsburgh for being a case study in systems change, and I'm very excited to share the results with you, future summits and future collaborative events. Thank you very much.
That was awesome. Good afternoon. So I am the cleanup hitter. Thank you for all of you who remain. That was great, and now I also want a robot for my office. So my name is Melissa Muroff. I'm the Assistant District Attorney in the Delaware County District Attorney's Office, and I know that we lost some people, so can I just see who here, who is left here, works in law enforcement? Is there anybody left? Yay, hi, I remember you. Okay, so, this is me, I assume, right? Okay, great. So, as I mentioned, I worked for the Delaware County DA, and when he was running, DA Stolzheimer, his Smart on Crime platform emphasized gun violence reduction and environmental protection. So, when he was elected, he, in fact, created a gun violence task force, and he launched the Environmental Crimes Unit, which I'm the chief of that. And that Environmental Crimes Unit is, to date, the only environmental crimes unit in a Pennsylvania District Attorney's Office. So the program I'm going to talk about today is a creative, compelling community prosecution initiative that really emphasizes the reduction in gun violence and illegal dumping. The Delaware County District Attorney's Office received a $2 million grant from the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency for the purpose of reducing gun violence in Chester, Pennsylvania. Now, by way of context, although Amanda, I see you there, you can speak to this way better than I can. I work with Amanda as well in the city of Chester. The city of Chester is the first city in Pennsylvania. It was founded in 1644, I believe. And for the first 200 years of its existence, it was thriving, it was prosperous, and since then, the population has dwindled to about 32,000 people. About 30% of the population lives in poverty. About 80% of the population are people of color, and it is home to multiple municipal waste industries, petrochemical companies. It is a designated environmental justice area, and circling back to this particular grant, it has had a high rate of gun violence. So the PCCD grant funds, this $2 million grant that I had mentioned, funds an initiative called the Chester Partnership for Safe Neighborhoods. There are 4 components in this grant: illegal dumping, an investment in law enforcement, which is reflected by the cameras, I'll mention in a moment, gun violence intervention staff and associated programs, support programs, and youth enrichment programs. One of the biggest youth enrichment programs we're funding is basketball camps. I'm going to obviously be talking about the illegal dumping component of this grant, but I can't really do that without actually mentioning the law enforcement investment as well. The law enforcement investment, among other things, includes funding to expand a real-time crime center in the cloud, which, and what that is a camera-agnostic network linking surveillance cameras of all sorts, such that it allows real-time feeds to Chester Police Department and the DA's office. So that particular technology is a game changer not only for gun violence reduction, but also for the illegal dumping program that I'm going to talk about. So I'm not going to walk through the drivers of the illegal dumping deterrence program funded by this grant, because I think that they're probably relatively common across illegal dumping programs in other jurisdictions. But I wanted to mention a few things. When we were drafting this application for this PCCD grant, we relied on the research of the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society's Land Care Program that demonstrated a correlation between neighborhood blight and violent crime. And in that application, we requested funding for this illegal dumping program. PCCD was persuaded by our grant application and approved an allocation of $200,000 over 2 years to develop an illegal dumping deterrence program for the purpose of serving gun violence reduction. The second point I wanted to make is kind of a hat tip to KPB, because we relied on their data to support our cost assumptions in our grant application. And then I just want to mention, broadly speaking, the goals of the illegal dumping deterrence program is to clean and green the most persistent illegal dumping hotspots, and then stabilize those sites, incorporate interventions, and support ongoing maintenance, as well as obviously, hopefully, having higher success rates in prosecuting illegal dumping. So, how did we get started in kind of creating this illegal dumping program? The first step was I got into the truck of the director of the Chester Department of Public Works, and we drove around Chester, kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah,
drove around Chester, and we photographed the persistent illegal dumping hotspots, and he knew exactly where they are, because it was he and his team are the team that are continually cleaning these up. And by that, I mean they are recurring dump sites. So we started out photographing dump sites, logging where their addresses were, and trying to capture a few characteristics about the dump sites. How well are they lit? How often does it recur? What kind of dumping seems to be happening there? So then the next step kind of reflects a great collaboration between the DA and the mayor of Chester. When we came together to talk about this grant, the DA's office and the mayor's office, one of the first steps that they undertook was together, it was to identify an illegal dumping working group. They both identified that that was going to be critical. And in fact, that is the Rockstar team. The director of public works is part of that team, the Chester municipal engineer, the director of the Chester Economic Development Authority, the director of Chester Licenses and Inspections, the director of the Planning Department, and of course the DA's office, and I've got a designated investigator in the Criminal Investigation Division as well to support this work. The goal, the obligation or the task of the Illegal Dumping Working Group is to continue to identify the dump sites, prioritize the cleanup of those dump sites, help us validate pricing assumptions, and provide implementation guidance of the interventions, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and then advise us on procurement protocols and, pursuant to our grant restrictions. So the Illegal Dumping Working Group so far has identified 44 illegal dump sites that are persistent illegal dump sites in Chester, 6 of which the city really considers to be a high priority. So the parameters that the working group identified for prioritizing cleanup are what's presented here. The items in bold are the ones that the Illegal Dumping Working Group really thought were a high priority. We, in the interest of moving as quickly as possible, we are focusing on either publicly owned property or illegal dumping that occurs in the right-of-way, which kind of fortunately for us is a lot of the legal dumping is in the right-of-way. So we have access. We don't need to deal with any other legal maneuvers in order to get access to the site. So the next step 3 now, is the surveillance camera. So I mentioned to you earlier that the grant is also funding an expansion of this real-time crime center, this network of surveillance cameras. And when I say surveillance cameras, I mean anything from the license plate readers that are mounted at intersections to Wawa's surveillance cameras to your Ring doorbell. Pretty much any camera can be integrated onto this network. And there's literally like a war room in the CID, in the Criminal Investigation Division in our office and in the Chester Police Department, where they see all of these live feeds all over the city of Chester. So in any case, it's really hard to read that. I'm going to use my own slides here for a second. So in addition to cataloging the illegal dump sites, we realized, okay, we really do need to catalog all the surveillance camera locations, and then to correlate those the cameras right now are positioned where there is high crime, gun violence crime. And they're not necessarily positioned where the illegal dumping is occurring. But we needed to correlate that right at the outset. Now, the company that is providing the real-time crime center is called Fusus, and they actually, their user interface is a modified Google map. So they are mapping already all of these camera locations, so we could correlate that with our dump sites. And then we are continuing as well to track ongoing investments. And the only other thing I want to mention about this, which is really cool, is, again, the Fusus network that we are using, this crime center, was originally purchased by the county to reduce gun violence. Initially, there wasn't any thought about how it could be useful for illegal dumping. But with this particular grant that I'm managing, I said, whoa, 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 whoa. I was like, you have cameras, we need cameras. So I said to the Fusus IT team, I said, can't we integrate illegal dumping onto your crime center somehow? I mean, what else can you map other than your cameras? And they said, well, you can map anything. And I was like, great. So what's happening in Chester right now, the real-time crime center in Chester, is Fusus's first foray into integrating illegal dumping into its real-time crime center solution. And lo and behold, once they started developing this, and they are developing the solution in real time with us based on the model that we're creating, they started reaching out to their other clients in like Atlanta and Lehigh County and other locations. And none of you would be surprised, but yeah, illegal dumping is a priority in all of these jurisdictions. So this is kind of exciting for us. So while Fusus is mapping out all its cameras and developing its real-time crime solution for Chester, we thought, well, naturally, capturing and tracking all of our data on our illegal dump sites should be done on a map too. So we worked with the GIS department in Delaware County to develop an interactive map of all of our illegal dump sites that would capture a number of attributes, at least all of the attributes I think we would need to track the performance under this grant. And yes, another nod to KPB, because I really relied on the various surveys and data in order to, like, am I missing anything? Am I missing any attributes we should be tracking? So I will talk more about that in a little bit. But the illegal dumping map, so the little orange dots are each of the illegal dump sites, and there probably should be more on that. But the point is that we wanted to capture a lot of layers, data layers, so that this would be home base for tracking what's happening in these dump sites, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we also wanted to correlate it with other attributes in the county. This, on the other hand, is the interface for the Fusus Real-Time Crime Center, which I don't know how well you can see because it's kind of light, but the green icons that you see are our illegal dump sites. They don't have all of them mapped up in this. This is an old screenshot. And then the cameras are the kind of faded white. So the cameras, in most instances, which like I said, were installed really to focus on gun violence, are not usually around our illegal dumping sites. So we have to address that going forward. So I wanted the next two slides identify the data layers that I'm thinking we will want as we continue to track what's happening at these illegal dump sites. So that's why I call it a wish list, because I'm not sure how much of this data I will actually be able to get in real time. So I'm not going to necessarily go through each of these, but again, the objective is not only to clean the sites, but to also incorporate some interventions, maybe lighting, maybe fencing, maybe signage. The funding also supports ongoing maintenance. I also want to know what's happening on these sites. Like, I'm pretty sure, but I can't prove it, that the majority of dumping is C&D waste from contractors, apartment cleanouts. That's probably, that we think, the two biggest offenders. So if there's a proxy or a general way we can sort of categorize what's in these dump sites, that's what we're going to try to do. And here's the rest of that list. So now I wanted to talk about the interventions, because it's one thing to get those sites cleaned up, but then what? So obviously I work in the DA's office, but there's obviously interest in increasing our prosecutions of illegal dumpers, but this is not driven just by our office. This is a huge priority in the city of Chester. The residents have had it. It's a huge frustration for the city officials as well. So all of us are pretty motivated to improve our success in prosecutions of illegal dumping. So, you know, obviously data sharing is huge. The DA's office is cooperating with the city L&I, the code enforcement officials, so that we will have a weekly meeting to discuss any of the illegal dumping that we've captured on these real-time crime center cameras every week, and then coordinate so that we can bring charges both against or charges for violations under state law, Title 18, 35, and potentially 30, as well as Chester's own or violations of Chester's own ordinances. So, and I think we've talked about this. Certainly, it was talked about in the enforcement workshop, but the fines for the local ordinance are much higher than the fines for the violations of state laws. But there will be other penalty options as well, depending on the circumstances. So I think that I will say this, without the cameras, without this real-time crime center, I'm not sure how much progress we would be able to make. For us, it is a total multiplier. It creates this multiplier effect where otherwise we wouldn't have the resources to track illegal dumpers. And then these are some of the softer interventions that we're exploring. And this is probably not, it's probably pretty self-explanatory, but oftentimes, you know, if we can make big changes, kind of like you said, by changing the approaches we ourselves are making, So in closing, I just wanted to, we're just starting with this process, so I don't have a whole lot of data to provide yet. But I just wanted to sort of summarize or reduce this down into the opportunities that I think we have. Right now, under this grant, we've got a really wonderful opportunity. The illegal dumping program is pretty well funded for this initial step. The other thing that is absolutely phenomenal and inspiring is the enthusiasm and the cooperation and the collaboration among the city officials, among the municipal district judge who's wants to understand what the program is, how to be supportive, local law enforcement at the county level. So that makes this part of it just really exciting. GIS maps have been around for a while, but the technology support offered or provided by the GIS tool and the Real-Time Crime Center are game changers for us. And so I think, and I can't offer anything about the land bank yet because it is literally just launched, but I'm really looking for ways that a land bank in Delaware County might be leveraged to help stabilize some of these sites over the long term, and I haven't quite figured that out. The challenge is basically we're all understaffed. I'm understaffed, city's understaffed, so that's not new to anybody. But and what I mentioned as well is that the cameras so far installed are really installed to focus on gun violence, and what we learned pretty early on is that the high crime gun violence areas are not the same areas where illegal dumping is happening. So we have to develop some other strategies for funding to get cameras on our illegal dump sites, but we'll get there. And the other point that I mentioned is privately owned properties are kind of off the radar for right now. Our highest priorities are going to be parcels where we have actual access. But so far, has not proved to be a rate limiting step for us. There's plenty of work to do in the parks and the rights of way. So with that, thank you very much. And I know we're open for questions, I guess.
Yeah.
So I do want to, I wish we had more time, but we do feel we're going to carve out time for questions. Because there's a reason I asked Chris and Melissa to kind of speak at the end, right? As I find both of them to be so inspiring. We talk about problems all the time. They're implementing solutions. And I'm just so grateful that KPB in our small way was able to help with our data or whatever you were able to link. So anybody have any questions for Chris? Yeah, go ahead.
For Melissa, I think mostly, but I'm wondering if, and I may have missed this at the beginning, if there was any root cause analysis or anything like that done to see why people are doing the dumping? Is it like inadequate resources to get to dump sites, or like what's the cause of it?
So if just to focus on C&D waste, so this is contractors, and they're usually kind of contractors that may not necessarily be licensed, small contractors doing maybe home renovations, and apartment cleanouts. There's a university right nearby. The short answer to your question is no. We did not do any research to establish the root cause, but I don't think there's been a push for that, because anecdotally, Chester's kind of a small town. The collective sense is that it's a good business model. I don't know, how else can I put it? The cost-benefit analysis for these little contractors to just dump it someplace, they're not likely to get caught. And even if they get caught, who cares? The fines are, it's way cheaper to pay the fine or whatever than pay to properly dispose. The apartment cleanouts is probably a timing issue. They've got students coming, going. Again, they're probably not going to be caught. So that's the sense, but no formal root cause analysis was done.
Well, after 20-some years of experience, I think most of us at PA Cleanways, and now Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful would say this.
Yeah. I'm probably saying that because I read it and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
I'm assuming, maybe incorrectly, that the cameras that you were speaking of are used for evidence as opposed to catching people in the act.
Well, for both, yeah, absolutely. I mean, within the first week of having, the DPW, the Department of Public Works, has 4 mobile cameras, which are not actually yet integrated into the real-time crime center, but they are uploading into a cloud where law enforcement has access, so we can check those now. But in the first, I don't know, week of those cameras being installed, 5 incidences of illegal dumping appeared to be captured on that video. We didn't have enough data. We didn't have sufficient evidence in that video to actually file charges, in part because camera's pretty good at getting a picture, a shot of the vehicle, but not of the license plate. So the reason, so we need to rely on the real-time crime center, because here's where what it boils down to. Somebody gets caught on video dumping at probably the worst site in the city of Chester. And if they happen to exit the area where they're dumping and pass through one particular intersection where there's an LPR, license plate reader, then you got them, because you probably have them because you've got enough video of the actual dumping and enough detail of the vehicle, and then, but you can't get the license plate. But then if you catch them going through the LPR, then you get their license plate, and if there's enough of an identifying something unique on the vehicle where you can absolutely say that vehicle, it's got this like red, it's got this dent in it and a luggage rack on top, and there's a safety vest in the front seat, and all of those attributes are in that, are represented in when the illegal dumping was happening. And that's how now we've got one that we're ready to charge on. But as more cameras get added to the real-time crime center, and as we're able to put more cameras in on our illegal dump site, I mean, we're really just starting. Our network isn't even fully built out yet. So I'm thinking, yeah, so I just see this really opening up over time. But you need all the cameras. It's not one camera that's ever going to be enough. You need to be able to track them through the city.
Are there any other questions? Well, I can tell you, Chris and Melissa, I've been telling my staff for a couple months that I don't want to do this again because it's so much work, special events. But I do, just so I can hear from you guys. Right?
Your presentation was so
well, I mean, it is. It's, so much of what we do at Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful, we try to take a systems approach to things, right? It's all about the big picture and integration and coming at it from different ways. And when I talked with you both about what you're doing, right, it's just so inspiring, and it's quite gratifying, right? Because we do a lot of research at KPB. And so when I see it actually being utilized, right, and so much good work being done with it, it makes it all worth it, right?
Yeah, keep doing it.
Well, yeah, I love it. So we will, I assure you. So thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're like worker bees at Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful. Like, we don't take enough time to, stop and celebrate. And I'm so grateful that we did again. 2019 was our first Litter Summit. And then, of course, COVID hit. But we were able to get so much work done since that Litter Summit. And now here we are, 2022, celebrating all of the amazing work happening. What you're doing in Pittsburgh is so exciting. Because when I remember, and Alicia, you'll remember, I was like, let's talk about that cost study. Let's talk about that cost study. Let's talk about, I was telling people in Louisiana, it took 9 months of selling to get 9 cities on board for that cost study. But it was so worth it, right? So worth it. $68.5 million gets people's attention. So again, in closing, I would like to ask the staff if they're here to just shake their hand or so we see them and thank them for all of their great work. Yeah, what? Yeah, I did the ticket. Yeah, and Heather keeps us in check. For those of you that have been with us a long time, Barb Smirker retired. Heather's new. She's our new office manager. And there's Kylie McCutcheon. She's our new affiliate coordinator. And you know everybody else. We've all been here a while. But again, I want to thank our sponsors again for your support, our state agencies for the endless support that we've gotten over the years and we hope to continue to receive. I'd like to really thank Phoebe for emceeing our day. Thank you very much, Phoebe. Thank you to our board, and I know someone asked for the affiliates in the room, but I want to tell you, you guys, we're so excited that you're here. We're so excited that you're a part of our network and that we're growing. And I feel like Pennsylvania has its best days ahead when it comes to, clean and beautiful communities because we're all working together. So thank you very much for making your way to Lancaster. I'm not sure when we're going to do another summit, but keep those good stories coming and give us reasons to pull everybody together again. And thank you very much.